A great many potters in the ancient Southwest decorated their pottery with reduced iron black paint. Unfortunately, the Indians didn't record how they were doing this. And by the time the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, nobody in the Southwest was painting their pottery with reduced iron black paint. So we're left guessing how they achieved this.
When you look at what is called Anasazi or ancestral Puebloan black on white pottery, you are really talking about several different technologies used to produce that pottery. Most replicas of this type of pottery made today are made using organic paint, even though that technology only represents a fraction of the ancient black on white pottery made in the American Southwest. Take for example Cibola whitewares such as Tularosa black on white or Pinedale black on white. These were painted with reduced iron and lead-based glaze paints respectively, which are very different technologically from the organic paint variety. Among the most famous southwestern black on white pottery types, Mimbres black on white was made using reduced iron paint. So although many reproductions of these types have been made, we still do not have a good idea of how the ancient potters were making and firing these mineral painted black on white types. The research we are doing here today will help to answer those important questions.
So the reason there's such a huge pile of hot coals here is I had already fired twice in this same spot. I saved the ladle until last because I wanted a nice really hot bed of coals to place this on. And I sure did have a lot of coals there. Right on top of the pookie, I got 846. Yeah, 839. Woohoo! That is what I'm talking about right there. Yeah, we are hot enough. That is right where I was hoping to get. Now, in order to get a reduced iron paint that I'm trying to achieve on this pot, I need to smother it. And so at this point, we're kind of reaching the oxidation phase of the firing as all this wood burns into coals. So I'm getting rid of all the wood that is still actively combusting, that is still flaming, so that I only have coals, and then that way I can smother it without trapping a lot of smoke and carbon inside there with it. And now I'm just taking dirt and I'm just going to smother the whole pile so that oxygen can't get to that ladle down in there. Now, because I'm miles from home out in the desert and it's really hot, I'm anxious to get home. I'm not wanting to hang around until this completely cools down. And so I'm taking temperature readings on the top of that pookie that I've used as a cover shirt to get an idea of how hot it is inside there. And once I think it's below about 260, which is the temperature at which iron stops oxidizing, I go ahead and open it up. Now when I pull that out of there, those blacks were black. They were midnight black. Unfortunately, as it cooled, it did oxidize a little bit. Look at that. Reduced iron. That was red paint, remember? It's a little bit reddish, a little bit purplish in some areas, a little bit brownish. But that's only because I should have let it cool I should have left it covered up and let it cool that way. But I needed to get home, so I opened it up early and tried to cool it off. And so it's a little bit brownish, but not bad. I'm happy with it. Reduced iron paint. So now that I know I can do it, I'll do it a little different next time. But I was trying to see if I could get it, and I did. Okay, so I'm out here firing my bowl today. And this is painted with 3 different kinds of red, as I talked about before. And so what I found with firing outdoors like this is that I can reduce iron at maybe 900 degrees Celsius. So I'm not sure the science behind it, but I can get that iron to turn black somewhere in the 850, 900 degree range. So here's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to try to get this fire nice and hot as I can. Now, as hot as I can means under 1,000, because I don't think I've ever achieved over 1,000, you know, maybe on a windy day, you know. It's not really a temperature I reach. So if I get it as hot as I can, I'm probably 9, maybe 950. And I'm gonna fire with oak. I'm gonna crib it up so it's gonna fire for a while. It's gonna be nice and hot. I've got my infrared gun, so I'll be able to tell how hot it is. And then once it starts burning the coals, I'm just gonna smother it, let it sit for a while and cool, and hopefully it comes out of the fire with some nice blacks. Then we'll test and see, you know, whether those red paints are fugitive or not, whether they rub off with your finger or if they're solid, okay? And now my friend Motz is here doing some experimental archaeology. He's got some test tiles here. You'll see those in the video, but it's not really part of what this video is about, all right? I've got 600 on that pot right now. All right, so we're about 850 degrees in there right now. We just put some bark on the top to kind of hold in the heat because the wood was starting to burn away and leave some holes. So the bark's burning actively right now, which is making a lot of flames. But down inside there, I don't know if you can see in this hole, you can see the pot, and I can shoot it with the infrared gun and it's plenty hot. You can see Motz's tiles too right in there. Ooh, that is seriously hot.
To do firing at night.
Oh! 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 It's just coming apart right now.
That's a winner. I think there might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, we got them all.
Okay. Okay, I reached temperatures over 900 degrees as recorded by my infrared thermometer. Pulled the wood away as it was starting to burn the coals and smothered it with a little bit of soil, sand really. And it really isn't that much sand. Honestly, if you had a large basket, it'd maybe be 1 or 2 basketfuls. I mean, you could do it without a shovel is what I'm saying, easily, like this on the surface. So I'll let that wait a while and cool down real good, and then we'll open it up and see what we got. But I bet you we've got some reduced iron black designs on the inside of that bowl. So, a lot browner than I wanted. Not really a good black at all. But, I mean, it's decent, but it could be a lot blacker. It's very chocolate brownish. Whereas that ladle I did, I think was a lot blacker than this. I know it was a lot blacker than this. So, oxygen getting into it through the sand? Maybe? I don't know. I mean, the outside, if you look at the outside, it's fairly oxidized all the way around. I mean, at least the browns look, the clay looks buff or brown color, you know, it doesn't look gray. So maybe I need to do a better job of shutting it down, you know, sealing it up, or maybe I need to do it earlier. I don't know, but yeah, it's fired nice and hard. You can hear it ringing. Look at that. Oh, like a bell. Yeah. So this little pot is meant to test different paint recipes for those prehistoric black mineral paints that we find in the archaeological record. So the red ones we see are iron oxides. Those are meant to turn into that black reduced iron paint if the firing atmosphere is correct. The black colored paints on here are lead copper based paints that will hopefully turn into a black glaze paint. So if this firing goes successfully, when I open it up, I will have a black on white pot, and I'll have different kinds of black paint. I'll have some that are reduced iron black, some that are glazy lead-based black. So the reason the glaze paint is important is I'm doing a workshop up at Q Ranch on Labor Day weekend, where we will be recreating ancient White Mountain redware pottery. And the authentic kind of paint to have on that is that lead-based glaze paint. So I'm hoping to figure this out before then. The red iron oxide paint is important because the Southwest Kiln Conference this year is in Silver City, and we're going to be doing a lot of Mimbres pottery reproductions there. And Mimbres pottery was painted with red iron oxide paint that was reduced to black. I'll put links to both of these events down in the doobly-doo in case you're interested in joining us at either the Q Ranch Pottery Workshop or the Southwest Kiln Conference this summer. Yeah, that time of year when stuff just burns super easy, you can see it. All right, so this is what typically happens when I'm out here firing and filming is I forget to keep the camera running. So it was hot, I turned the camera off because it was sitting in the sun and it was getting warm. And then when I smothered the fire, I forgot to record it, so. What happened was I let the fire burn to coals, and when it got to coals, I pulled out all the wood that was actively burning. I've got that sitting over here. I completely buried the other fire. So it's got the pottery sitting down underneath those cover sherds, underneath some hot coals, and all covered with dirt. So I'm gonna let that cool for a good half hour or more with those. We'll see. Now the pot that's buried in the pit has been in there for at least a half an hour. I haven't looked at the time, but it's been a while. So at this point, it's probably cooling off. I'm gonna start pulling the dirt back a little bit and see if I can use that infrared gun on the top of the cover sherd to see just how hot it is in there. And if it's below about 300-400 degrees Celsius, I'll start opening it up. If not, I'll let it cool some more. God, that's warm. Goodness gracious. Come on out of there. It's really black. It's black on white. We got some glazy spots on it. We'll clean it up and look at it when we get it back, but we've got really good black. So I do have a little bit of glaze in places, I think, and I've got black. That's iron black. So now let's look at the little test jar. So the paint along the rim here, that was half hematite and half red clay. It all reduced really good. And I say that because it might not be as black as I'd like, but there's no shades of brown or red. There's no warmth in it. It's all shades of gray black. It's good reduced iron paint. Let's look at the glaze paint now. Section 1 is 2 parts lead, 2 parts copper, and 1 part red clay. And we can see that it's glazy. Although it's not glass and shiny everywhere, it is kind of what you might call a subglaze everywhere. It's fused with the pot. You cannot rub it off. And it's a decent black too. The one complaint I would have is it's got a fuzziness around the outside. Section 2 is a lot like Section 1. It's the same recipe. It's 2 parts lead, 2 parts copper, 1 part red clay, plus it has beeweed added to it. So Section 1 had no organic binder. Section 2 has beeweed as an organic binder. And I would say they're roughly equivalent. Section 3 is very similar to what I used around the rim here. It is 1 part hematite, 1 part red clay, but it also has beeweed.
Comparing it to the other areas without bee weed, I don't see any difference. I don't see any difference in the texture. I don't see any difference in the color. It's pretty much the same. Section 4 is definitely a blacker black. But section 4, the recipe is Cortland hematite, so a different source of hematite, and bee weed. So some people have said that iron in the right atmosphere will sinter, it will fuse with the clay without having a fixative in it. This is nothing but hematite and bee weed, and it has not sintered at all. In fact, it completely wipes off, as you can see.
As the fire started to burn down and hadn't reached my desired maximum temperature, I added more wood to it at this point. $780, $730, $730, $750. Hell. Oh my goodness. Oh my word. Oh, oh my gosh. That's a flea. All right, let me explain what just happened. The pot was really black. I took a couple pictures with my phone because I wasn't sure I was capturing it on this camera, but the pot looks really good. It looked black, black, black. So the place where I'd had that bowl kind of leaned up against the jar. When I pulled the bowl out, I left a big hole, you know, that if I just started throwing dirt on there, I was afraid that dirt would start, you know, come right up in contact with the jar and make it all dark. When I was setting it all up, I had these cover sherds that I'd made that I brought to fire. And I left one of the cover sherds out because I just didn't have room for all of them in the firing. So I grabbed this cover sherd that wasn't fired and I thought, well, I'll just stick it in there and it'll, you know, at least keep the dirt off the pot. The problem was that cover sherd, you know, was heating too quickly when I stuck it in there and it just started popping and falling apart. So the cover sherd was going to bits while I was trying to smother it. And I wanted to get it smothered as quickly as possible because I didn't want any oxygen to get in there and start turning that black red. So here I'm trying to smother it. That cover sherd that I stuck in there was just pop, 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 going to pieces. So I stuck some other cover sherds, some smaller ones kind of in the hole, and I think I got it kind of filled in so that the dirt didn't come in on the pot, but we won't know until I open it. So now I've just got to wait, you know, a while, maybe an hour or two for this to cool down enough that I can pull the jar out without re-oxidizing that iron paint. We got to wait for these to cool. Then we'll pull them out and we'll see how we did. Okay, this has cooled so that I can even touch it. So it's beyond oxidizing temperature. Let's see what it looks like. Oh my goodness, that is as red can be. In fact, it's significantly redder than it was before I fired it the second time. So the pull and smother is not working. Turning red on me right now. How hot is it? 168. All right, let's recap what we learned here today. First of all, pull and smother does not work. That bowl oxidized real good, so must be the oxygen that it gets as I pull it out. If you're gonna smother it, probably better to smother it in place in the coals. A smother in place obviously works. This was black when I opened it, or it was blacker when I opened it, and it turned red after I pulled it out. I hit it with my infrared gun. It was like 150 degrees Celsius when this was literally turning red. This isn't suited to doing on a day trip out into the country. This is better done on like a camping trip where you can just leave it there for hours overnight and pull it out the next day when it's ice cold, because this red will oxidize at pretty darn low temperatures. Also, the white, it isn't as good as a white as I'd like. It's quite dark. It's got carbon in it all around. And I think that had to do with the environment being fired in that pit, maybe not enough air circulation, maybe I didn't get the temperatures up the way I needed to, or long enough to burn that carbon out. Let me show you my mug real fast. Okay, the mug, again, also has oxidized places, but I'm really happy with a couple of things. First of all, look in this area right here. The black that's a good black. I'm super happy with the quality of that black. And the way it gradiates from black to red, you see that on a lot of Mimbres pots. So the gradation right in here between black and red is perfect for Mimbres. So even though it's not fully black, I really like it. Again, I've got a lot of carbon in my surface. So this is something I need to try to figure out. Okay, so when I was firing this, I was actually firing two pots and two different fires separately at the same time. And that's why there didn't start out coals in this shallow pit I dug. I shoveled the coals from the other primary fire over to this one. And then the stones are my kiln furniture to hold it up off the coals, and then the bowl sitting above that, so that hopefully we can burn all the carbon out underneath before we smother it, so it'll have a nice clean white. Now, because it's just this one small bowl in this shallow pit, the firewood is pretty short. You know, maybe a foot, 18 inches at the longest. And then I refueled it several times, and I think one of the reasons I kept having to refuel it was the pot is so small. There's so little pottery in here that the stack of fuel isn't sufficient to, you know, get up to a good temperature. So you can see it's burning kind of lethargically at first, so I add some more smaller material just to try to get that fire to burn with a little bit more enthusiasm. I think I refueled this probably 3 times over the course of maybe a half hour or so. And finally I got up to about 800 degrees as my top end. And then by the time it had all burned down the coals, I got rid of some of the coals on top, just kind of exposed the top of the pot, and then I just pushed down this metal pot over the top as a way to smother it without putting a bunch of dirt on it, just to see how it does. I'm hoping that the metal pot idea will allow me to leave sooner. Last time I waited 2 hours for it to cool. And then a little dirt around the pot just to make sure that we weren't getting any air around or under the pot. Alright, this has been smothered for about an hour and a half under the pot here, and the temperature's down fairly low on the pot. It's showing about 40 degrees Celsius. Now, no doubt the pot is quite a bit hotter than that. But reduction wasn't even the main focus of this experiment. Fluxing was. So I'm really not that interested. I mean, I'm interested in seeing how reduced it is, but I'm more interested in seeing how it's fluxing. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off and see what we got under there. Nice and black. Nice and black. Look at that. I don't know if it wipes off yet, but it's definitely, well, it looks fluxed in places, if I can just guess by the texture. But let me cool this off and we will see where we're at. Okay, again, like last time, my whites aren't as white as I'd like. They're a little on the gray side. I think there's a little bit of carbon in there. If you look at that white, you'll notice there's little black specks in it. I'm assuming carbon. Now this was fired upside down, so it's not things that landed in the bowl, but indeed specks of carbon. It appears to be, you know, little dots everywhere. So this is the Cortland hematite right here, and it's, you know, that's the best black of all, which my previous experiments have shown that Cortland hematite is a good black. I like to get an early start on firing day because the air is the stillest right at dawn, and then it tends to get breezier as the day goes on. So an early morning firing has the least air movement, which is good for your firing. In this case, it turned out to be a little breezier than I would have liked, and that allowed the firing to get pretty hot, a little hotter than I would have liked. These are just small branches of mesquite wood that I'm firing here, and notice that the diameter of the fuel is pretty small. It's all small enough that I didn't even need an axe. I could break all of this with my foot or over my knee. An infrared thermometer is not a primitive tool, but it sure is helpful if you're going to try firing this way. I'll put a link down in the doobly-doo to where you can pick up one like mine for about 50 bucks in case you're interested. Now, if you've watched a few of my firing videos in the past, you've probably seen me try to achieve reduced iron paint. I've made a few videos about it. I'll put some links to those down in the doobly-doo and also one or two up above as well. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to try to smother the pottery, and I've tried different ways and had marginal success. So in this case, I'm going to try an unauthentic Sager smother. So I've got a big flower pot here, and I'm just going to put it over the top and then put dirt around the sides and over the hole and try to smother the fire. What I'm trying to do is keep oxygen away from the pot as it cools. Those red iron paints, which are black now because the fire has been consuming all the oxygen, so those paints will stay black as the pot cools. Okay, this has been in here for over 2 hours now, and the outside is quite cool. Oh, doggone it. Well, heck. It fired good, but I got quite a hodgepodge of oxidized and reduced areas. This horn got too hot. It's really weird. It's kind of crackly looking. Definitely got too hot right in this area. Most of it looks pretty good though. All right guys, there's my little sheep. I think he came out pretty good. Now I cleaned him up as best I can in the field, but he's still got some ash and stuff on him. So I'm gonna take him home and clean him up better. So if you watch this video all the way to the end, you'll see some photos of a better, more cleaned up version. Now how does this compare? I got some areas where the paint oxidized red and other places where it reduced black, and I'm cool with that because that was really common on the ancient Mimbres pottery. In fact, I was looking at pictures of Mimbres jars recently. Now, most Mimbres pottery is bowls. I was looking specifically at Mimbres jars, and I saw that I couldn't find any that were fully reduced black iron. most of that paint was either fully oxidized, red, or it had kind of a mix of red and black areas, much like what I got here. So I think my firing was on par with what the Mimbres were achieving. Now, were they using big pots like that to smother their pottery? Probably not. But I want to test that out and see how that works, and then move into trying to find ways to accomplish the same thing using more primitive techniques. Good morning. Today I'm out here to fire reduced iron paint pottery. If you've been following my channel for a while, then you know that I've struggled for a long time to try to get reduced iron paint right. But today's the day I finally get it. And why do I say that? Because with each of these experiments, I've gotten a little closer. I've learned a little bit more about how to do it correctly. So today I'm going to take all those bits of information that I've learned from past experiments, apply it to today's experiment along with some recent advice, and hopefully I'll get those red paints to turn black in the firing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the technology of reduced iron paint. I'll talk a little more about the history of reduced iron paint later on in this video. I found that I could reduce iron paint with just an ordinary surface fire if it got hot enough. But then as that pottery cooled, those black paints would turn red as that iron reoxidized. I thought that at a higher temperature, that iron became robbed of oxygen, and at a cooler temperature, it grabbed oxygen from the atmosphere and became red. I found that it had not so much to do with the temperature as the atmosphere. Just the act of pulling the pot away from the coals was enough to start it oxidizing. And so the coals were part of it. Even though they had burned down to hot coals and were no longer actively flaming, they were still absorbing oxygen and keeping that pot from oxidizing. Now, a lot of people have gotten reduced iron paint in a lot of different ways. There's a million ways to skin that cat. And I'm not looking for just a way to achieve reduced iron paint. I'm looking for a way to achieve reduced iron paint that seems logical to be the way that the ancients did it. That seems plausible to be a way that the ancients did it. I obviously don't know everything about firing pottery outdoors, but I do know a lot. I've performed hundreds of outdoor open pottery firings, and I have no problem sharing the information I've learned. That's why I created an online video-based masterclass to teach what I do know about outdoor pottery firing. It's called Outdoor Pottery Firing 101, covers all the bases, and should get you going on outdoor pottery firing if this is something you're hoping to learn. I'll put the link to that down in the doobly-doo in case you're interested in learning more about firing pottery like this. So my problem with reduced iron black on white is almost not so much reducing the black. Here's some examples of some reduced iron paint that I've gotten pretty darn good. And the last one was this sheep, and although it wasn't pure black, there were red spots. Those areas that turned black were pretty black. I think the biggest problem that I'm having is getting the white truly white. It's always a little gray. It always absorbs a little carbon out of the atmosphere. So reducing while oxidizing all the carbon out, but keeping the iron reduced. That's really the trick. Red. All right, so very mixed results, and I'm gonna try to be brief here because the wind in the mic. We got our white we were looking for. Most of these whites are pretty hot still. Most of the whites are really good, which is what I talked about earlier. That's what I was going for. Unfortunately, blacks, I didn't get almost any blacks. There's a little black on the mug, but for the most part, these are all quite red, at least on the brownish side of red. So let me drive home. Let me think about where I might have made my mistake, and I'll wrap up when I get back to my studio and maybe have some ideas on how I can improve next time. Iron painted black on white pottery was among the earliest decorated pottery made in the American Southwest. So it seems as though it didn't evolve out of some other tradition or some other technology. People started making reduced iron black paint on pottery from the very beginning of decorated pottery. And the Cibola region, the specific type of pottery called Cibola black on white that I'm trying to recreate here today in this canteen, that is one of those earliest traditions of iron painted black on white pottery. It started around 550 or 600 AD with just crude designs painted on the outside of gray or whiteware pottery. In the following centuries, this type of pottery evolved into the most beautiful and elaborate designs. It's among the most sought after prehistoric pottery type in the American Southwest. In the 1300s, black on white pottery went out of style, replaced by more vibrant polychrome potteries. Well, this red iron paint won't make black designs on a polychrome pot. If there's any red painted areas on the pot that you want oxidized, then you need to use a different recipe for your black. Therefore, the technology of using red iron paint to make black designs was lost. Today, the descendants of the Cibola whiteware potters at Zuni Pueblo no longer know how to make reduced iron black paint because this technology stopped being used around 1325. Okay, I'm back for a second day. I'm going to try to refire that canteen and get it right. I don't accept failure very well. So on my way home yesterday, I kept thinking about the different attempts at reduced iron paint that I've done and going through the different scenarios in my mind. And really, the two most successful were that little test pot with the different kinds of paint on it. That all reduced really good. Even though the whites weren't really as white as I'd like, the reduction was good, and that was buried in a pit in the ground. The other one that had some good reduction on it was the sheep. And the sheep was fired on the surface, but it was covered with that pot instead of dirt. Somehow I think the dirt is either introducing oxygen or it's leaking a little bit. It's allowing a small amount of oxygen to seep through. So I'm going to try firing that canteen in the ground this time, buried under the ground. Hopefully we'll get less oxygen in this time, and I'll still work at trying to get those whiter whites. So my plan is to just keep firing that canteen until I get it right or until it breaks to bits. We'll see what happens.
Never ends. Let's be more than friends. Yeah. If you love me, oh, can't believe you love me. Oh, I just feel so lucky. Still can't believe you love me.
All right, it came out okay. I've got some good blacks on here. I've also got some good whites on here, but it's also kind of a mixed bag. There's a big red spot on one side. Most of it is black though. And there's places where the black kind of gradiates a little towards the brownish purpley side. But for the most part, I got good blacks. I've got a really big smudgy spot right here, and you can kind of see the smoke from whatever this was kind of drifting up into this area. So I'm almost wondering if when I threw all that dirt on top of it, if a stick or something flammable didn't fall down in there and burn and cause this whole problem right here. So probably clean fill is very important. And the fill here was not clean. I've been firing in this spot for years, and it's just a hodgepodge of charcoal and ash and dirt and sticks and things. So probably clean fill would be very important, and this was a problem here. Overall, I think I learned a lot, and you know, I'm not completely unhappy with it. I think, like I said, in places it looks really good. So I'm going to take this as a learning experience. I'm going to say success, and I'm going to move on to the next one. And down the road, I will do some more of this reduced iron paint, because this is something I'm wanting to get nailed down this year. So I recently got a hold of some notes that an old replicator made years back about how he fired reduced iron black paint. And although all the notes don't make sense to me, as far as they don't seem like a logical way to go about it, he says that this is a very successful way to do it. So I've built a firing pit in my front yard, and then I made a pot that's just the right size to fire in that pit. And today I'm going to try following the instructions and see if I can get this red paint to turn black. So first, let me take you out and show you the fire pit that I made in my yard. It's my understanding from the notes that it's important to have the sides of the pit not vertical, to have them kind of slope in. I tried to make it that way, but I wanted the bricks at the top so that I could kind of seal it off and smother it. So I'm not sure if maybe adding those bricks kind of gave it too much verticalness at the top. And so this is my first firing in it, and if it doesn't work out, I can always reconfigure the pit and try again. And then I made this lid for it out of cement board. So the idea is that once I get the pottery fired, I can smother it and keep oxygen out as it cools using this cement board and some mud. This first step is just to heat up the pit and to build a foundation of some hot coals that I can then stack the pot on top of. So I want a good 4 or 5 inches at the bottom of hot coals before I put the pot inside. So the pot that I'm going to fire is still inside the house. This one is just about the same size, about 6 by 6. And so I'm using this just to kind of make sure I have enough room. Because when I put the pot in the pit, I want to be able to put coals over the top, and then I still want to have room to be able to put that lid on it later. So I need to measure, as I'm doing it, kind of how much room I have. And so I'm just going to let this burn for a while, and then I'll go get the pot when I'm ready, and I'll start putting all the coals in. I'm trying to get relatively small coals for this part so that I can use the larger, chunkier ones on the sides, which will encourage better airflow. And now the kiln furniture that I'm using are just a few sherds. Just to verify that that'll sit there and it won't hit any coals. Okay, now that's pretty central. Now, I almost always fire pottery upside down, but the illustrations in the notes showed the pot being fired right side up, and so I'm purposely doing that. So the one thing I've changed about Holly's notes is he said at this stage, when you put the pot in, you should put 6 inches of coals down between the hot coals and the pot, and then set the pot directly on those hot coals. And I just thought that was unnecessary. First of all, it requires a very deep pit, but all he's trying to do is give it a nice slow warm up. And I have already had this pot in my oven for like an hour and a half at 175. So it's already driven off any remaining moisture, hopefully. And I think by setting it on those sherds and allowing those coals, a few of them under it and around it quite a bit, to heat up, that does essentially the same thing. So I'm trying to outthink Holly, and I could be completely wrong here, but it's an experiment, right? So if it doesn't work out, we can always do it again his way. But I think, from what I know about firing pottery, that 6 inches of cold coals on top of the hot is superfluous, unnecessary. Okay, so the way this is supposed to work, according to the notes, is that once the coals on the bottom are red hot, then I'm supposed to pour in the rest of the charcoal all around the pot. Fill the pit up with charcoal. The notes don't indicate any sort of cover sherds. Now, I don't really want the charcoal going down the neck of the jar. I think I'm going to put a cover sherd right over the opening.
Shimmering, glittering, make waves in the sky. Stick my tongue out, draw a line in the sand just because I can. Ooh, ooh.
A big part of any smothered firing is timing. Knowing when to smother is a big part of it. And I'm no expert. I do know that if you smother too early, your pots aren't clean, your whites aren't good. With a reduced iron, it's harder to smother too late. With organic paint, you can smother too late and burn out the paint. Like I said, I haven't done enough of them to really be anything close to an expert on it. Now what I've got here is some mud that I mixed up earlier that I'm going to seal that lid on with. It's just clay and sand mixed, nothing fancy. I'm just going to put these bricks around the edge to make sure that we keep a good seal there. Although again, it's all new to me, so I just don't know what our chances of getting a good seal are. I mean, there could be one little crack and oxygen gets in and ruins my blacks. So many places where we could go wrong here. Okay, as you see, it's pretty hot out here. It's like 9 o'clock at night and it's, 100 degrees or something, 90 something maybe. Anyways, all done. I got this all sealed and I'll just pack it in for tonight and we'll open it up in the morning and see how it did. There are some cracks in the top of the cement board this morning that weren't there before, so that's interesting. I don't know if the heat must have caused that cement board to crack. We'll see when we get inside of there. Oh, look at that. Just as dark as can be. Lots and lots of carbon in the surface of that pot. And the red didn't even reduce. So the red stayed reddish and the white turned black. Complete failure. All right, so if you go back and watch some of my previous firings where I was doing reduced iron paint, none was as terrible as this. None. I've gotten some where it's a little on the reddish side or where it's a little gray. I've never had one this terrible. So this was abject failure, and I really have no idea at this point what went wrong. I followed the instructions pretty closely, except that I didn't put that 6 inches of coal at the bottom. I just don't see how that 6 inches of coal at the bottom would have changed the outcome here. Why didn't that iron reduce? Too much oxygen? The pit was leaking? I have no idea. It didn't get hot enough? It's clinky, so why is it all black? Did I not oxidize it long enough? Perhaps. One thing I have learned in trying to do this is that coals are important. Proximity to coals are important. This one had quite a few coals around it. This one was surrounded by coal. I just don't know. But the big show for Saturday morning was that trench kiln. I'm not sure how many pots were in there, but that was a lot of pots. That was a big firing. And Kelly Magleby was in charge of that firing, with some help from others. The pots are stacked around the fire and preheated. She preheated for hours in this case. I never preheat that long. This went on for, 2 or 3 hours for preheating. And while that was going on, it actually started to rain a little. And so they put all these cover sherds and bits of tin over the pots to try to protect them from the rain while they were preheating. Once the primary fire was done, The coals were raked out along the bottom. Kiln furniture was put on top of those coals, and the pots were carefully stacked in the fire, and then cover sherds were put over the top of that. And then after the pots are all stacked carefully in that trench, the secondary fire is built over the top of all of that and lit off. And when you're firing this many pots in a hole in the ground, it takes a pretty big fire to fire them on. And by this point in the morning, the wind was starting to pick up, so you can see this fire is really raging. This trench kiln firing process goes on for hours. After that secondary fire has all burned down to coals, and there's nothing flaming or smoking left, then they come back with shovels and they put the earth back over the top of all those coals and smother that fire. This prevents oxygen from getting to the pots as they cool, which keeps those whites super white and allows those organic blacks to stay super black. Now the timing of this step is critical. Too early and your pots will come out dark, kind of carbony looking. Too late and you'll burn out that organic paint. After the smothering, everybody goes away and just leaves it until Sunday morning when it's opened. Now Sunday morning, we all got up early ready to open that kiln and see how the pottery turned out. So first they have to take off all the overburden, that is all that soil. They have to remove the cover sherds and kind of expose the pottery. And then slowly they start pulling the pots out and seeing how they did. This was a very successful trench kiln. Everything came out really nice.
Right up and haw, up and hurl. This guy, he's halfway in there. He's ready.
If you can touch your pot, if it's not too hot to touch, you can hold it. You can take it. So any with organic paint are gonna have an ash layer where it looks white, like here. So you'll have to clean it off in order to see the black underneath.
That's mine. That's
Whose
mine.
fancy wiener dog is this?
That's mine. Mine.
Who's it mine? Andy.
Iron ox. Can I touch it? Is it hot?
The handle's not.
Yeah, all right. My pot that I had in that fire was this sheep effigy. Now this was painted with iron oxide paint. So it was an experiment for me to see if I could get a reduced iron in that trench kiln. And as you can see, it's dark. It's darker than it could be. It's not a bright red as it was when it was painted on, but it is a little on the brown side, so not really good reduced iron black. So I'm going to refire that sheep pot and hopefully get it to reduce to a good black in a future firing. So not long ago, I built a little fire pit in my front yard and tried reduction firing a pot. And it didn't come out so good. In fact, it was a complete disaster. As you can see, it's all dark and covered with carbon spots. So there were several things that I think went wrong. Today I'm out here in the country to try to rectify that problem. Hopefully I can fix it and we can make some progress here. So also, I have a bowl out here. So the jar is a refire. The bowl has never been fired. I just finished painting this yesterday. So I've got two different firings I want to do. One for the pot that I'm going to do in a hole in the ground, and one for the bowl that I'm going to do on the surface. So hopefully we can make some progress in understanding how reduction firing was done back in the day. I found that the proximity of those coals, of those hot coals, is very important. So if you look at this sheep effigy pot that I made last year, turned out really good, but the places that turned red, if you go back and look at when I smothered it with that sagger, the places that are red are those places where the coals were not in contact with the pot. So I think the coals in contact with the pot is part of the equation. And so today I'm going to try that. Not only on the pot, which is in the ground, but also with the bowl on the surface. I'm going to make sure that when I put that bowl down on the ground to smother the inside, that there are coals under there with it. And that hopefully will eat up any remaining oxygen in there and leave me with a reduction atmosphere. Careful preheating of the pottery is critical to eliminate most breakage in an outdoor pottery firing, especially for the bottoms of bowls. If you saw my most recent pottery firing video, you saw how not preheating the bottoms of bowls can be catastrophic. Here you can see one of the big differences between a pit fire and a surface fire. In the surface fire, the coals start the fire up all by itself. You don't really have to work getting that secondary fire started. In a pit fire, there's sometimes a gap between those hot coals at the bottom and the fuel in the secondary fire, so you have to work harder at it. Now I'm ready to start smothering this bowl on the surface. And so what I'm doing here is I'm kind of lifting the bowl up, pulling those rocks out that it was sitting on, and I'm going to put that bowl right down on the surface of those coals and then pour some dirt around it. That way we can keep oxygen out in the later stages as it cools. Okay, so here's where I'm at. First of all, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm making it up as I go because, as I mentioned, nobody knows how this pottery was fired exactly. So we'll see. You know, as I was putting the dirt on, I could hear like little explosions going off in there, like little puffs of smoke or something, you know. Something was going on sound-wise as the dirt was being heaped on top. I don't know what that was. Could that silt have been like sliding down in there and hitting the pot and maybe going off as it hit the hot pot? I don't know. I really don't want that soil sliding in there. What I was hoping was that the coals would kind of make a barrier and then the soil would sit on top of that. It may just be a problem of the type of soil we have here and the dryness of it. So I think I'm just gonna take a break, read a book, maybe go get some lunch. I hate leaving the pots, but I don't think anything's gonna happen to them. I haven't seen any cows or anything in the area, so they should be okay. It just makes me nervous to leave them here under the ground. And then I'll come back in a little while and open them up and we'll see what we have. That's how I learn, right? I just have to keep trying new things and taking good notes and making adjustments and trying again. And so this is, you know, I don't know, my 5th, 6th, 7th attempt at reduced iron. And I think I'm getting closer. We'll see. Okay, let me talk a little bit about how I did. This is relatively clean. Still, I think it's a little gray and it could have been smothered a little later to get the whites a little cleaner. The lack of reduction in here, or you know, in places at least, tells me maybe I didn't get a good seal. Maybe I should have got it down in the ground a little more, just pushed it down in there. I'm not really sure about the smothering on these bowls. The whole smothering the bowls on the surface is still a work in progress, an experiment. I do have to think that maybe we were leaking oxygen or I didn't get enough coals under there. Just don't know. Now the jar, this is in fact permanent gray. So the notes I got from the old replicator said, smother it too early, get black on gray. Smother it at the right time, get black on white. So it's better than it was before in that we got good reduction and it's cleaner than it was going in. You know, that was completely covered in carbon. But still have a long way to go towards white. I think I need to learn to wait, let it sit there and just cook for a while before I smother it. I'm in too big of a hurry to smother, and so I think the timing on that is really critical. Letting those coals kind of burn down so there's nothing that's, you know, creating smoke. And I think maybe some of that dirt, some of that dirty dirt may have seeped in and not helped me out much. So it's better probably if I have not so silty a dirt. This dirt is really fine and kind of dusty, and it'd be better if it was like chunks of dirt. It would be a little more solid, not run down in there. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Okay, I just buried that fire and it is 10:30 in the morning. So I'm gonna give that at least 4 hours to sit there and kind of cool down. The rest of the time, you know, I just gotta stand around out here. I brought a book, you know, this is my property, so I've got my ruins and stuff I can check out and other things I can hike around. So I'm just gonna burn some time and let this pot cool off, and then we'll come back and see how it did. Big surprise waiting this afternoon out here. Oh, hot tamale. Let's see. 142, 100, 130, that's too low. Broken cover sherd. I hate breaking cover sherds. These things are not lasting well. Well, all right, here it is, all cooled off now. Rings like a bell, so fired nice and hard. I'm really happy with the blacks. I don't see any place where these oxidized into a reddish color. Maybe some areas might be a little blacker than others, but for the most part, I got good reduction. The ongoing problem that I've had, is carbon. There are places where it's real carbony, and you can see there's quite a fire cloud on the bottom there. Now, I believe those kind of things are usually caused by that dirt when I'm burying it, that dirt sliding in there, pushing things down in. I think smothering it is actually causing a lot of the carbon. As that dirt hits the hot coals, it's causing a certain amount of smoke. So my next goal, now that I've pretty much got the reduction figured out, is to try to figure out how to get these cleaner, how to get them to come out of the fire cleaner. Now I'm putting in what I call kiln furniture. These are just large stones that hold the pots up above those coals. And in this case, I'm using relatively large kiln furniture because I want a lot of air circulation under these pots. I am also refiring that Mimbres bowl you see sitting next to the pit. That's another project from the Ancient Potters Club from way last year. That's already been fired a couple times. As I was trying to figure out this reduction firing, I fired that a couple times. Failures, was unable to get it to reduce iron. So I'm refiring that in here as well to try to get that iron to reduce to a good black. Those cover sherds that you see me covering the pottery with are there to protect the pottery from both the fuel and the dirt that'll smother it later on. Cover sherd, I am 780. That's good and hot. And this one over here, a little more exposed, I am about 820. In fact, I can hit one of the cylinder jars this way. There's a big old gaping hole. The cylinder jar is 820, and it's looking as clean as a whistle. One of the problems I've had with these smothered pit firings in the past is that at this stage, if I look in and see the pots, they look clean. I've burned all the carbon off of them. After I've smothered them and pulled them out, they're always a little gray. And I think, just a theory, I think they're picking up carbon from the earth that I smother it with. I think as that earth hits those hot coals, it has, a certain amount of organic matter in it. It's smoking, and that smoke is graying the pots. So in this firing, I'm actually going to protect the dirt from those coals by putting more cover sherds over the top of the coals. So I've got like a sandwich there, right? I've got the pottery, then I've got a cover sherd, then I've got coals, then I've got cover sherds, then I've got dirt. All these layers protecting one thing from the other. But the hope is that when I open this, those pots are clean. Those whites are brilliant white with no gray carbon marks on them. The idea here is to just keep the oxygen away from those pots while they cool. So once you get it smothered, then you have to wait about 4 or 5 hours until they're cool enough to pull them out. My biggest concern at this point is that the pots are still hot enough to oxidize. And so as I open it, I'm being especially careful to make sure that it's cooled off enough. Now that dirt and the pots can still be pretty hot, but it needs to be below about 300 degrees Celsius. 130, that's nice and low. If the pots were too hot when I open it up, then the paints, those red paints, which hopefully have turned black in this reduction firing, would start to oxidize and turn red again, which we don't want. So hopefully they're going to be nice and black. Mimbres polychrome. Well, we got black and white, but the brown didn't turn brown, it turned gray. That was already cracked when it went in. It cracked a little more. All right. Cylinders look great, huh? Look at that. Clean as a whistle. Clean as a whistle. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Good blacks, good whites. That's the best reduction firing ever. Fired nice and hard. They're both fired nice and hard. And the blacks came out good. The whites came out good. It oxidized better. Oxidized the carbon off. Freaking, the flies are crazy out here today. It oxidized the carbon off better at one end, and I'll have to look at some of the video and figure out which end that was, whether it was like upwind or downwind or something. But one end has a little more carbon on it than the other, but for the most part, real clean, real good. Super happy. So you can see that I'm really getting this reduced iron painting down.